Without further ado, Kerstin Robinson is the co-founder of Nix Kix, a drinks business that she scaled from an idea to multi-million revenue with products stocked in thousands of outlets globally. She expertly managed the company's finance and funding strategy, raising over £4 million from angels, investors, and syndicates. Kerstin also led the company's branding and marketing initiatives, driving its growth and market presence. So essentially, all of the fabulous hats of being a successful founder. Kerstin, welcome to this one-day event. All right. Classic 2020 Zoom faux pas there. You're on mute, I'm afraid.
Yeah, you know what? My internet just went. Oh, that's some even more classic thing. And then I came
That's
back and was muted, but now I'm back. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, no, I'm all good. Thank you very much.
That must have just dropped out when I was doing the intro that most of my guests get embarrassed about. So that was a good kind of little bullet dodge for you there, Kerstin. All right, well, welcome back. You're with us. Hopefully the internet stays with us for the next hour or so. You're off mute, so let's dive in. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the screen actually so that we can just focus on your lovely face here. All right, so Kerstin, obviously the subject of this conversation today is very much your journey to success. So let's rewind the clocks and go earlier days. I couldn't help but notice your corporate career, which obviously miles away from your career as a food entrepreneur with Nix Kix. I have to ask, was it an intentional strategy to go into cushy corporate career and build up a financial reserve before launching your own business? Or was it very much just putting kind of one foot in front of the other to begin with?
No, that was not strategically thought through as most things in my life. It was more like back in the days, back in Germany still, everyone had like a corporate career. There wasn't such a thing back
For
then
sure.
to think about, oh yeah, I want to be an entrepreneur. That wasn't even like discussed, like I don't know anyone that was an entrepreneur. But I knew tons of people that went into corporate and stayed there forever and ever. And back in the days, we were still thinking, oh yeah, we'll start with a company and we'll be there in 20 years time, 30 years time. Obviously now no longer the thing, but back then was still kind of the thing to aspire to.
Yeah.
So yeah, started there, and I truly liked finance. I started working at Deutsche Bank and then worked Credit Suisse, and came over here and worked for HSBC as well. And I always thought, oh, finance, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. But realized, quite quickly that it's just not a nice place to be. It just wasn't for me.
Hmm.
But obviously I thought, oh, maybe that's just the employer, so let's just move to a different employer, and had similar experience there. Then moved to another employer, same experience there. And at some point I realized, well, it's obviously not, it's not the corporate world, it's me. And maybe I want to do something completely different. And that's when I
So
thought, let's do that.
amazing. And just before we do get into that, I am not at all surprised by that answer because so many people who have that corporate career before transitioning into entrepreneurship, it wasn't actually a planned out strategy. But having interviewed quite a handful of entrepreneurs who made that leap from corporate into starting their own business, it is not a bad strategy because you bring so many strengths to the table. There's so much you can learn. Crucially, also have to say, is the money that you build up, and this is where the financial reserves that do make it easier to take that jump. As I said, it's not a bad strategy to kind of go down that path. But anyway, it wasn't kind of the foresight that you had. It was very much one foot in front of the other. So with Nix Kix, what was the spark? What was the initial idea to get it started?
So I was always interested in healthy food and drink products. I loved going into Whole Foods. My husband is from the US, so we spent quite a bit of time over there on holidays. Would travel around California, lots of different places, and obviously Whole Foods really big over there.
Hmm.
And generally, like nice, interesting, healthier products are much more successful over there. It seemed, but basically over 10 years ago, we're definitely a lot more over there than in the UK. And I just thought, wow, this is so exciting. It's so good to see all these good things. And then we came back to the UK. I went into a pub, tried to order a non-alcoholic drink, and was offered a J2O, and it's just not very good. It's a
It's a lot
it's
of
a it's a
sugar, right?
product full of sugar, full of artificial stuff, doesn't taste good, doesn't look good. What's the point, you know? But it's selling tons, you know, like it's in every pub. So I
Mm.
thought there must be something better that we can make to bring to consumers, and started experimenting. Was still working in the corporate world, so didn't quite quit the job immediately, and just went to markets on the weekend and tried out different things. You know, brought basically or made the drinks in my kitchen, very very small scale and very much like just experimenting around, and then took the product to markets locally. Tried different areas as well, so I didn't want to just go to like fancy places like, you know, Marylebone, or like the kind of more well-to-do people are. I tried different areas as well. Went to markets and just try to like bring this to people, and thought, you know, maybe that is a good way to test the market and see, do people actually like that, or what do people like. So that's
Interesting.
how I started.
I was exactly going to ask, okay, so you've got the initial inspiration. I just have to mention at that point in the story as well, how often, to the rest of our listeners here, the one day community, how often I've also heard these stories of people who have traveled, who have physically gone to other parts of the world, and they've seen whatever, how other people are living, other innovations. I have got a list as long as my arm of examples like that. So it's just another pattern I'm picking up on there with you as well, which is awesome. And then, so you've got that initial inspiration, and then moving it from initial spark of an idea through to, okay, could this actually be a business? Are there more people than just myself getting annoyed at the fact that I'm only being served sugary J2O drinks in the pubs? With that validation, the market validation in mind, was that physically going to markets as you just described and just testing out the product with people in real life at these markets?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or
So
was
that
it
was a,
good?
yeah, that was a first test to see what people thought. Obviously, there were a lot of learnings within that as well, because people face to face don't ever give you their real opinion, as we know.
Yeah.
So you can get someone to try the product, and you ask them, I mean, and then maybe mention as well, I'm the, this is like my business idea. This is me I
Yeah,
made this kitchen. And
they don't
obviously
want to
people
tell
will
you.
then say, that's rubbish, I hate it.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
so that was a learning that we had at some point. But then obviously, sometimes people would, the main thing there was, do people actually pay for this, right?
Yeah.
Because, people can tell you all day long how much they like a product, but if they don't pay any money for it, then it's pretty pointless.
Yeah.
So yes, that was the thing. That was basically just understanding how much would they pay, who is
Hmm.
the person that pays. But again, I mean, it's just a market. It's obviously not your environment that the product will then actually sell in later on. So what we did then, as a kind of next step, is also, we were just so done with markets at some point, because as we just discussed earlier, the weather in the UK, rubbish most of the time. And I still know, because there was a market in St. Paul's, and there was this shopping center, and it was just this big wind tunnel, basically, this shopping center, and we were in the middle of that was the market. And oh my God, I had to like really hold on to my stand for a lot of the time, because it was so windy just going through
Oh
there.
my God.
And obviously, as you can imagine, if it's windy and cold, also no one wants to have a cold beverage to try. So we kind of realized that is probably not an environment we should be in to test our product going forward. And what we did instead is we just walked around, and one day just came past this little coffee shop, or salad shop. They were making salads in the shop, and walked in there and said to the guys behind the counter, "Hey, your shelf is empty at the moment. Would you be okay for us to make our drinks, maybe in your kitchen, and then we can put it on your shelf, and then you can have the money. We don't want any money. We just want to understand, would anyone pick that product off a shelf?"
That's
And
amazing.
Yeah, because that is actually the real test, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some kind of random person walking into a store, seeing your product, you not standing next to it and trying to sell it. The product itself does the sales. That's obviously the most important thing.
I
And that was
love that.
the thing.
I love that anecdote so much. And what I want to underscore for our listeners here is, Kirsten, in that scenario, you demonstrated what I believe to be pure entrepreneurial spirit. It's that it's seeing that opportunity. You walking past this cafe, you just so happen to be walking past, you see this empty space, there's an opportunity there. You also demonstrate fantastic negotiation skills, because you're like, what matters to me is getting my product on your shelves, getting that visibility without me standing there and holding on to my billowing market stand in the meantime. You don't care about the money, you just, that's your goal, you use that to leverage, to negotiate, and you get it on there. So what happened? I mean, obviously it was a success, but what did you observe through that fun experiment?
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very interesting. I mean, first of all, obviously, just being there in that environment and seeing people picking up the shelf, and sometimes picking the product off the shelf, and sometimes people would just pick it up, look at it, and then put it back on the shelf, And that is obviously also very interesting then to know what was going on in that person's head, that they'd kind of initially decided they were interested and they're no longer interested. And it was, for me, it was just so good. And I would just come up to that person and ask the question, then what is it that then, why did you not go for it? And people were always like, who are you? Why are you there? Why are you asking me all these questions? And if someone then picks it up and goes to the counter and pays, then I would also be like, oh, who are you? I want to know more about you. What do you do
Yeah.
in your free time? Just like, and obviously people are then a little bit like, what is this,
Yeah,
why?
especially Brits, right, in the UK. So you weren't there right next to the product like you were in the market stand, but you were ready to pop up behind the scenes when you needed to. So I have to ask another question in these, while we're in the early stages of your story here, just before we move on any faster. I do love to talk about the practicalities. A lot of our listeners, they're starting out for the first time, they're learning the ropes. We've all got so many different challenges to overcome. In terms of MVP, how were you able to develop that initial batch of your bottles of your product without going like full on into like factories and this kind of wider scale manufacturing?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it was still us making the product in the kitchen. At that point, obviously, in the kitchen of that shop, but that shop didn't have any heating, and it was the winter. It was really, really cold in the back there. But we did it in overnight mainly, and then in the morning it would be ready. And it was obviously not pasteurized or anything, so we had to make it fresh basically on a daily basis. And that was obviously super low cost. All we needed to find the ingredients and pay for that. But it was a small experiment. It was only that one outlet, so it was
Mm.
easy to do and it was easy to oversee. So yeah, obviously that wasn't kind of what we were gonna do forever. So as soon as we had some pointers around what kind of flavors do people like, um, what should the product look like, etc. That is when we then went one step further. We got a startup loan from the government. That was we got a grant as well from the government at the time, actually, which was very, very useful. So it wasn't a lot of money, but we paid someone to do our initial branding, which was, I think, £1,000. So actually quite, now thinking back, super low. But at the time, we were like, wow, £1,000, that's quite a lot of money. But someone did some branding for us initially, just so that it looked like a proper product with all the information it needed to have. And then we found a very a nice kind of competitor actually in our space. We knew he needed a machine very badly, and we said, well, I mean, he wasn't producing for anyone else, but we're like, well, we have this grant money from the government. Would you mind making a batch for us, pasteurized, so that this would have obviously a shelf life? And we gave him the recipe, and he replicated them 1-to-1. And he made a batch for us of a couple of thousand bottles, so not massive as well, but just enough so that we could go to a festival. We had signed up to the London Coffee Festival, which is quite a big event, and had a stand there. and try to sell our product there, and obviously also find some coffee shop customers while we were there. And we sold out on the first day, so it was a great success. It was really good. But
Wow.
yeah, you know, that was then kind of the next step for us. Coffee shop festival, then we got some coffee shop customers from that, and then we seeded it into like smaller coffee shops in London with the help of this small producer that was making thousands of bottles for us in one
I
batch.
love, thank you so much for breaking down like step by step in this journey where it is literally from like, what can we make in our kitchen fresh, put it on some shelves, not taking any money from it, still very much in that market research discovery phase, to then gathering all that data, getting a loan, getting a grant, and then taking it to that next level. So, quick question here in the story as well. Why did you decide strategically to go into coffee shops versus, say, for example, like driving a ton of traffic to your e-commerce site or pitching supermarkets? Why coffee shops?
Coffee shops are just easier to deal with at the start, because at the start you just wanna still, even though we had now a couple of thousand of bottles made, we still needed to validate a bit more. We still needed to understand, do we, you know, that shop purchases once from us, which is already amazing that they did that we couldn't convince them to pay for a product to put it on their shelf. But then obviously more importantly, you want to know, do they buy it again? Is there, you know, do customers buy it once, or do they buy it again and again? And that is only when you have a business, right?
Yeah.
So it was still a lot of learning at that point. And well, e-commerce wasn't really a thing at the time so much, especially not for a beverage product. Still is difficult. This, you know, right now is still a pain to send a liquid around the country. But that wasn't even in our mind at the time. Of course, we were thinking about supermarkets, and we were already going to events where we knew the supermarket buyers were, to get a bit of their feedback. And we quite quickly actually met with the head buyer at Tesco's, who loved our idea. And he was like, this is really cool. I like it. I like the concept. You're just not ready for us yet. You know, I mean, you will hear that a lot. When you start a business, you're not ready for us yet. But I mean, we were really not ready for them. We knew that as well. But
Yeah.
we had some great feedback from them. We kind of knew what we needed to do to get there, but they needed a bit more kind of convincing. And the convincing they could only get by seeing data from us. And the data would initially come from these little shops that would give us a chance, whereas obviously a big chain at that point wouldn't have not given us a chance.
Yeah, I love that. Step by step, low hanging fruit. What can you use to leverage to get up to the next level? Something else I just want to highlight for our listeners as well is I love how you mention how essentially like your risky assumptions evolved at each stage of the business, right? So the initial stage was, are there more people than just myself who would like a healthier beverage alternative to J2Os in the pubs? Then into what flavors do people like? Will they pay money? Do they like it? To then, do we have repeatability? Do we have retained customers who keep coming back? What I want to ask you next, Kerstin, is at this point, had you already quit your corporate job, or where did that happen before you went full time with Nix Kix?
Yeah. So at that point, yes. I had already quit my job. I quit my job um, after I understood that from the market, you know, the small markets we did, there was demand, or there was interest there.
Mm.
I have to say I quit my job, and then like a day later I regretted it so much. I went to my boss and I said, can I have my job back? I don't think that was the right decision. But he knew how much I hated my job, and he knew how much I loved like doing something myself. So he was like, no, you can't have your job back. Sorry. He was doing me a big favor there, although at that point it didn't feel like
That's
that.
That's really interesting, and I applaud you, Kirsten, for being so candid in that part of the story as well. Because part of my question there is, did you have enough validation? Because again, whilst you hated your corporate career, again, I'm sorry, we've got to be real about it. Like, I'm sure the paycheck kind of made that pill easier to swallow every month. And so, you've now got a family, mortgage, all the rest of it. So there does need to be enough to take that leap. Did you feel at that point in time, I appreciate we're rewinding the clocks a little bit, but did you feel like you had enough validation at that point in time, or was it a bit more of a leap of faith where you had to sort of go in blindly and just be like, I've got to do this full time, otherwise it's never going to get off the ground?
Yeah, it was a bit of a leap of faith. I have to
Yeah,
admit that. Yeah, I mean, we were not stocked in a proper shop at that point,
yeah.
and that was yet to come. So it did feel a little bit like, well, what am I doing? Is this the right thing to do?
And
But
that's
yeah.
yeah, it's something that comes up a lot, right? Like, should I quit my day job? Do I spend more time working on this? Like, there's a little bit of that, self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, if I quit my day job and go full time on this, I'm going to make it a success versus, well, there is still a very real risk factor to it. I don't want to be an idiot about it either. So, what were the safety nets for you, Kirsten, that made that decision easier to take that leap of faith, as scary as it was?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I had some money saved up, as we were saying earlier. Obviously, that's the benefit of having had a job for a while. You can kind of live off your savings for a little bit. And also, we knew we were gonna get the startup loan, which did help as well. Of course, that loan needed to be paid back, and it was a personal loan, so quite a risk as well. And it's not for everyone to do that, but it was good to know that that was there. And then I have to say also I was lucky because I had not a husband at that point, but a boyfriend that was was working and earning money.
Yeah,
So we lived together. So I had, not quite I didn't feel like I had the same kind of risk as someone maybe that would have been like on their own, even though it was
exactly.
actually difficult initially for my husband to understand what I was going to do. And he was initially the one that said, no, absolutely not. You shouldn't be doing that. So, he didn't want to take the whole risk, of being responsible for the family. So obviously every situation is different. It's yeah, but for me it was quite nice to know that there was someone else that was earning a bit of money. Yeah.
I think this is it's such an interesting discussion point because as an entrepreneur, inherently you have to have a higher risk tolerance than most. But I think you've also got to be careful, especially us as mentors on the one day program, to not give dangerous advice either, right? Because we don't have a crystal ball. Of course, we say, is there data? What have you got to back this up? What can you show to validate that this is worth the jump? But then it's, I don't know, like I keep my pendulum swings back and forth with that because I'm also very much a believer that you're the master of your own destiny. And so sometimes it's like sometimes you do need to go all in, sometimes there is no plan B and you just need to kind of work to make it a success.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That is what happened in my case. I just thought, now I needed to make this work.
Make it a
Um,
success. Yeah, because it's the fire up your backside, it's the rocket that's like, I don't have a paycheck coming in this month, I have to, so I think there's something interesting there around like how much does the entrepreneur force themselves into a successful business versus pushing on an open door and riding a wave that's naturally there with that market demand. So it's shades of grey, it's very nuanced, it's very complicated, but I think it's interesting to talk about.
mhm.
All right, moving on in your Nix Kix journey, similar on a similar vein, what were the first signs that you remember that you had product market fit or that you were onto something that was going to be a success?
Oh yeah. Product market fit. When do you actually know that? Turns out, we really understood our customer and market pretty late in the journey. And maybe we were just lucky as well, starting up. And I think the problem we had initially or throughout the journey a little bit is that there's so many people out there that have all sorts of different ideas and opinions, and usually they come in the form of consultants or and they say, yeah, oh, your product is amazing for these people. Or you have a marketing agency that are like, yeah, your product is a millennial product, looks like a millennial product, they will love it. And we were kind of not sure, right? But then obviously when you hear people more and more talk about it, you kind of get like drawn into this, and you just decide that must be it then. So we were spending quite a bit of money on probably the wrong consumer for quite some time, obviously trying to figure out where these young people are, and they're like at certain festivals, there's certain events, whatever, and it was going okay, but it wasn't like going amazingly well. And only like a while into the business, can't even remember how many years, but it was years into the business when we did a focus group with with different types of, and that was part of our rebrand exercise actually. So that was the goal, that we wanted to have a different branding on the pack, and we just wanted to understand who this pack should appeal to. And it's kind of embarrassing because at that point we should have already known who really our target customer is, and we kind of had a hunch, but obviously, like being, as I said earlier, you always like being like kind of swayed into a different direction by some other expert that thought they knew better. But those focus groups were so crystal clear, giving us amazing insight into consumers. And obviously they need to be done properly. And we've hired someone to do that, that knew how to run a focus group. But so we did like 4 different sessions. 2 sessions were with these young people that everyone was talking about that so apparently loved our product. They were all in their early 20s. And they were basically recruited to sit in a circle and discuss the product. I was sitting in the back, but they didn't know that obviously.
Oh no, we seem to have lost Kerstin, sorry. And is that just me, or can anyone else pop in the chat? Has Kerstin frozen for everyone else? Yeah, we lost her. Okay, all right, not just me then. So that was such a good story. We were on such a good cliffhanger. Although I feel like there was a ticking time bomb there because Kirstin's internet did fail earlier, so I feel like we got a good half an hour or so. All right, let's see if she rejoins in a second. Oh, looks like she's complete. Oh, there we go. She's back.
Sorry, I don't know what's happening here with my internet. It
Welcome back.
never has
Welcome.
any. But yeah, sorry, mid-sentence, I've now been interrupted. So yeah, basically, yeah, these focus groups, I mean, at the end of this 2-day session, I was already like, this business has no future. People obviously do not understand the product. And then we did a focus group with people in their 40s. And similarly asking the same questions at the same kind of round together. And they loved it. They gave it an 11 out of 10. They were fighting at the end of that session. They were fighting over who could take that product home. It was like night and day. And I was just thinking, why didn't we do this much earlier? Just like, and it can obviously be done a bit more lower cost. But and it didn't cost us a lot anyway. It was a like low expense in comparison to all the marketing money we wasted.
Right.
Yeah, over the years. And that made it so much easier. Suddenly, a
Wow.
lot of things that we thought that we needed to do as a brand were just not like for us anymore. We didn't need to think about that. We didn't need to go like thinking, oh, we should be at this like festival that these young people hang out. Wasn't something we needed to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So and then, yeah.
Sorry,
Sorry.
go on, go on.
And then we could also find other brands that were in our space, that were also targeting same customers. And we could do collaborations with them, or it just all made things a lot easier.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that that was one of the regrets, doing a focus group, something like that sooner in the journey? Yeah, would have saved some marketing dollars.
Would have saved a lot of time and effort and money, yes.
Well, again, appreciate your candor and sharing that when one of the pains in your founder story that are, of course, the best lessons often come from the biggest mistakes. So I think that is gold dust that we're sharing with the one day community here. Is it's funny that you mention millennials as like a target audience. Marketeers in particular have got a tendency to go all in on the youngest, newest generation. Like now it's all about the Gen Zs. And it's just like this, it's just the allure of like that's the new up and coming generation and you're like, but no, it's these overlooked 40-year-olds. Another thing I just want to ask you about, Kirsten, while we're on this topic, did you learn anything else regarding consumer behavior, and specifically I'd love to get your thoughts on demographics versus psychographics, because you just mentioned there about millennials, 40-year-olds. I, for one, feel like age, really is just a number. I feel like it's a very lazy shorthand way of categorizing your target audience. One 21-year-old is not going to be the same as this 21-year-old. Did you like, what are your thoughts on that? And did you learn anything else related to consumer behavior in those focus groups?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to say I learned a lot about other bits as well, apart from just the age being a big differentiator. I guess for us it was just, as you say, it's lazy, but it's easy, and sometimes easy is not a bad thing. Um, Especially when it's like really all of them agreed, and they were all so, and it was just this kind of it would have been different if there was a 50-50 division in opinion, but it was so crystal clear. And I have a feeling, yeah, I mean, yes, there are obviously other ways of looking at it, and in theory there should be. It's just sometimes a lot more costly to do that. Maybe I'm,
Mm.
but it is sometimes it's easier to just look at someone and be, okay, you're obviously not 20.
Yeah, yeah.
um
Was, I don't
versus.
know how, I feel like this was quite a while ago, so I'm not sure how well you remember, but was there any other diversity in terms of class, race, gender? With that mix, was the age the only commonality? I'm just super curious.
Right. Yeah. No, of course, there were some other things as well. They were all female. That was deliberate because the female is usually the person that does the shopping, unfortunately, still, right? And also we kind of knew that we needed to like find one kind of gender, I guess, initially to figure out. You can't have like, because then we would have had to do many, many more focus groups because you have the women, men, this age, that age. So yeah, so it was female. And also we focused on people that had kids. And that actually was quite an interesting insight as well, because turns out that what the feedback there was is because if you have obviously kids in the house, suddenly you're more concerned about what is in your fridge. And the feedback there was, well, I can quite safely put this product in my fridge because the kids will drink it, and I don't have to feel bad that the kids are drinking it.
Have a shift.
Versus
It's funny that, isn't it? We care more about what they're putting in their bodies than we do with ourselves. It's amazing you just mentioned the keyword safely there, because as you were saying about parents and that shift in caring about what they put in. As a quick side note, I was listening to an interesting interview with Emma Grede, who is the co-founder of a lot of the Kardashian brands. So she started off with Good American with Khloe Kardashian. She then did Skims with Kim Kardashian, and then because of COVID, and she has 4 kids, and she was spraying everything and like plastic, she was super conscientious about germs and bacteria and everything else, launched Safely with Kris Jenner as so I was thinking about it, and then you said the word safely. I was like, oh yeah, amazing. All right, so
Mm.
it's this came to mind. Were there any other like interesting consumer behaviors just before we move on? So it's
Uh,
mainly parents, that age range was critical.
yeah, yeah, just to have a cutoff. And yeah, I think these were the main kind of ways to differentiate. Yeah, broadly. Obviously, later on, then we delved into it a bit more and try to figure out, where do these people shop?
Hmm.
What restaurants these people do? What do they? Where do they go to? And obviously, we looked also at the demographic in terms of, how much available income do these people have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was all done as well. Yeah, as part
I
of
love
that.
I love all that sort of stuff. And one more question, so I'm going deep on this. I'm just super fascinated. A marketeer is my trade, day job. So I can't help myself. But were there ever, like, as a drinks product, did you ever glean any information at all regarding like other brand associations? So like did your customers ever purchase it as that non-alcoholic alternative at the pub, or did they buy it with a sandwich for lunch, or was it like a fun drink to go with dinner instead of water, like that type of thing? Like, did you find anything out about that?
Yes, yes, that's a very good question, because at the beginning we thought this product could be had during any occasion, like
Right.
it's a drink, you can drink something in the evening, you'll drink something at lunchtime. At some point, we even tried to tell people that this is a great drink to have in the morning, because we got the feedback actually from some customers that said, hey, if we wake up with a hangover in the morning, this is a really good product. This really, especially our mango and ginger was like the one that people would drink if they had a hangover, and they would feel so much better. Yeah, afterwards. And we took all this information from people and we're like, whoa, this is a product for everyone, for everything, every occasion. Amazing. But actually, it's not amazing because you can't be everywhere, and you can't, like, because what does that mean then? Well, you have to sell the product in coffee shops, in kind of your meal deals in the supermarket, and in the restaurant, and in a pub in the evening. You've got to have all these different outlets then covered in a way, and it just was like, whoa, okay, this is and we did try for a while to cater to all of these different occasions, and also then be visible in all these different outlets, but you can't support them. I mean, Coca-Cola can, because they've got the marketing budget and they've got the money available to do that. We didn't have that, because all of these customers obviously wanted us to support them. So yeah, we learned also at some point during the journey that we should really just focus on one occasion, just figure out which one is the one occasion, and figured out that it is the meal deal, the lunchtime occasion. When someone goes into a Tesco or a Co-op, and they see in the chiller, oh, these are the drink options, this is the sandwich, and then they just buy their meal deal, and that is absolutely where a product sells best.
Yeah, I love that. And just to underscore there, you mentioning in the UK, like two of our biggest supermarket brands there, Tesco, Co-op, they're very much kind of on par. And it would have been a different strategic decision to go into, you mentioned Whole Foods earlier from the US, Waitrose, like they're different flavors, they've got their different brand positioning themselves. Do you have something to say on that?
Yes.
Like, oh, I thought you would.
Yeah. I mean, yes, Tesco is a brand that obviously has a certain, you think there's a certain customer type, but Tesco has different types of Tesco stores. Tesco has more high-end Tesco has more low-end, and they have categorized them, and they will put your product into certain stores that they think are better suited to your consumer type.
Yeah.
So and some Tesco stores are just like a Waitrose in the sense of what their consumer profile looks like. So, and equally, we did launch in Waitrose, and our product was there in aisle number, I don't know, 17 or something in Waitrose, and was in a sharing format because that's what Waitrose wanted. But it complicated things so much because you then had to produce cans for the meal deal, and you had to produce these sharing bottles for Waitrose. So yeah,
and I think I'm aware that I'm going a bit deeper on this particular point, but to our listeners, you've got from the outside, ignorance is bliss. You can think, oh, I want my products on supermarket shelves, and then you unpack it and you're like, okay, but there's a difference between having a pack of sharing bottles in aisle 17 in Waitrose versus cans at a Tesco Express with your lunchtime meal deal. And not to kind of make anyone too anxious, but there is a consideration around where do you need to show up, in what environment, in what context, for who and for which occasion, right? And this is, I mean, for everyone else, like this took Kerstin years and years to work out the answers to all these questions. These questions are not going to be answered overnight. So I think that's where it's really interesting to unpack this. There's lots of flavors, pun intended, to this whole thing. There was something else I was just going to ask you on this. I think it was just while I was listening to you there, I think just also something to mention to the listeners is you've got these marketing ploys specifically with drinks, such as, you've got things like JD and Coke, for example, the way that that just kind of rolls off the tongue, like Jack Daniels and Coke. It's like, these are two big brands that you need that mental availability, and you need to make it easy for people to kind of put those two and two together. The Clay Christensen video, which I hope most of you have watched as part of the program, which is the milkshake experiment, which was discovering that McDonald's customers were sipping on a milkshake as a breakfast. So you've got all these different use cases and different customers, different profiles. So that's why it's super interesting. All right, Kirsten, let's move things along. That was super interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think you can tell I would love to keep talking about this, but I'll keep things moving. So you mentioned brands a few times. Oh, you're frozen again, so I'm not sure if you're going to leave us. I will ask the question if you're still there. That's a lovely screen for you to freeze on, by the way. You look very lovely in that frame. Actually, I don't think she's. Oh, is she back? Are you with
Sorry,
us?
just like, yes, I am.
Did you hear
Yes, I
me? That
am. Yes, yes. Can you hear
you
me?
look, you were paused in a very nice position. You were smiling and happy. You look lovely. It can so
Meanwhile, I'm freaking out here because the internet was down again
yeah,
for a
yeah, yeah.
second.
It can so easily go wrong when you freeze on a Zoom. Like, oh my God, I look so awful. Anyway, um, moving on. You mentioned branding a couple of times in the story already. So you paid like $1,000 for your first basic design job, and then you did a rebrand, which sounds like that was a bit more expensive than just £1,000 with the focus group, etc. What was a key like creative brand marketing highlight for you in Nix and Kicks? What's something that you're really proud of? What's something that worked really well for you guys?
So in our obviously instance, as we were a product that was in stores, in physical outlets, what worked the best, and is just the best thing to do is do it in store, point of sale. That's where you will get the best return for your marketing spend, and there really be a bit more creative around how you can position your product, where you can position your product. Secondary space in a store, absolutely amazing when you can get that, and really make sure that the product looks good on shelf. And I know this is super time consuming and super annoying, because even if it is agreed with the chain, with the retailer, doesn't mean that they will execute it, because it depends on a store manager to make sure that it looks good on, in store. But we just managed to become really good friends with these store managers, especially in these key locations, Piccadilly Circus, all these kind of places where the footfall was unbelievable. Trying to figure out also which ones are the high footfall stores, and it's usually the small ones in the best locations, not the biggest ones in kind of outside of the cities. And just really make sure we kind of get friendly with these store managers, so they really got behind the product, because they are equally as excited. I mean, they don't see brand owners very often, of course, because Coca-Cola, the CEO will not show up in the store.
It
And
should.
in
They probably should.
yeah, they maybe should, but maybe they don't need to. They make so much money, they don't care. Yeah, and they are just so happy to support small brands, because they love to tell the story to other people. Hey, I was one of the first people to help them. I knew the founders. When they go big, suddenly when a brand goes big, they're like so proud that they were part of it. Um,
Oh,
so it's great to just get them on board, because they will do maybe a few things for you that they wouldn't necessarily do for other brands, just because they don't have the time, and they just don't have the kind of visibility or the kind of care. So it did pay off, because that number, if a big footfall store is doing really well with your product, and they obviously sell loads of that, then that gets reported in the numbers. And then head office look at the numbers. They're like, whoa, this product is doing amazingly well versus competition or versus expectations. So this must be a great product. Let's put it into more stores, and then, yeah, go from there.
just goes to show the power of that human connection, that personal touch, doing those things that don't scale as well, right? Like it's not scalable to personally go into the Piccadilly, Tesco, or whichever supermarket it was, right? And like build a relationship with the store manager. But it's that sort of stuff that's going to cut through, that's going to help take it to the next level. All right, Kirsten, the time is flying. I've got one more question, and then we'll come to the Q&A in the chat. So just to also say thank you so much for everyone. I can see some of the questions coming through, so keep them coming, and hopefully we'll have time to answer them. Kirsten, last question is around the fundraising. So you mentioned, so the very early days, you had some savings from your corporate career, you had a startup loan, you got a grant, so we're off to a great start. I mentioned in your intro that you ultimately succeeded in fundraising £4 million from angels and syndicates. Why did you decide to go out for external investment? Why did you feel the need for that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, us as a consumer product, the margin's not amazing, and I guess it hardly ever is with a food and drink product. So you kind of have to, I mean, raise money. In particular, that was the time as well, 10 years ago. That was kind of the thing to do, raise money, right? That's what everyone was doing. It was kind of trendy to do that. If that is even a word to describe it, but it was kind of normal to think about it. And it was easy. It felt easy as well. Obviously, the government here is kind of supporting that a little bit, giving investors certain tax breaks if they invest in small businesses like us. So it felt like a natural thing to do. And we didn't obviously do it instantly. We waited a couple of years, obviously with the loan and with the kind of trying to figure things out. We kept it very lean, very low cost. But then obviously at some point when you were then ready to launch in a bigger supermarket and they were expecting certain things from us, we kind of needed that extra money to help us out. So yeah, ended up raising some money and did it, every year then from then onwards. And I'm not, saying that is a great strategy to follow just because fundraising is a full-time job.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's kind of, it was necessary at some point. It just became necessary every year, it turned out. And because there was a kind of a cycle there. But it wasn't something that was adding a lot of value to the business. It just needed to be done. So yeah, we raised money from angel investors. Luckily, also very lovely people that kind of left us alone and just gave us the money as the best investors usually,
Oh,
right?
that's
They
the
give
dream,
you
isn't it? Right? The best of give me your money,
they give
leave me alone, let me run my business.
Exactly. Yeah. So we were lucky in that sense. Obviously, you can also be unlucky and get some investors that maybe not invest that much of money, but still have a ton of questions for you, and kind of let you, kind of take you away from actually running the business. So, but still, it was still a big job for us. Every kind of year to raise more money once you're in that cycle. It's just and as I said, margin's not amazing, so you kind of need to get the volume up, and to get the volume up, you kind of need the funding to do that. So I think it's a natural thing, but yeah, it's a very time consuming thing.
Yeah, makes sense. Absolutely. Okay, great. Let's come over to the audience questions. Johnny, thank you so much for the question. Right. So Johnny's asking, how did you maintain the freshness of the product? So I think it's like literal freshness, not just kind of like brand freshness. Did the product have shelf life and how did you manage the process? That's a great question. Thank you, Johnny.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah, we pasteurize the product, so that gives it a shelf life. It's interesting because obviously you kind of as a business owner can decide what your shelf life is within certain, obviously you can't say your shelf life is a year when it definitely will go off after a week or so. But for a drink that is pasteurized in a can or bottle, you find that usually a shelf life can be 18 months, or you can even put 2 years on it in theory. So yeah, initially we said 18 months, and then I think we increased it a little bit. And it's still good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the product even after 2 years. It just doesn't taste that well anymore at that point.
I didn't know that at all. So I'm definitely learning something here as well. Johnny, thank you so much for that question. Davida, who was your first hire and why? So I think specifically the job title, you don't need to give their name away.
Yeah,
What was
no, yeah. We actually got a lot of interns initially to help us out, and that was like a really good way of not spending a lot of money and having people there. So people that were keen, they were usually at the time, that was before Brexit, was maybe a bit easier, coming from universities that would want to or needed to do a placement with a company. And so they often were paid for by the university. And I think UCL also has a program here in the UK, for example, a marketing program where you can find really amazing people that have great ideas and that get stuck in and do great things. And some of them would stay for you for half a year, some maybe a bit less, some maybe ad hoc. But funny enough, those were our first employees. They all came from universities.
Amazing. I'm just typing in the chat. Immediately Google's UCL interns. um, Davida, thank you for the great question. I hope that answers that. Just before we do move on, Kerstin, I appreciate you said interns. You mentioned marketing as well. What were your the functions? Were they marketing or were they a bit more just like scrappy generalists?
The very first one was sales. And that person was, again, someone that wanted some work experience and then just, walking around coffee shops and selling the product and then reselling the product, because just because a coffee shop owner has ordered your product and there's demand for the product doesn't mean that he will reorder, because they are very busy people. And sometimes we would walk into a shop and be like, do you want to reorder the product? And they're like, what, why? And they're like, oh, right, I didn't realize the shelf was empty. Yes, I want to reorder. So you need someone to basically do that.
I love that. So kind of like sales, account management, and it makes sense as well because it is the lifeblood of the business, right? Like sales has to be the first priority, and either you're firing up the sales function, the resource to drive sales, or you're freeing up your time to do founder-led sales. Either way, like it's the top priority. Okay, I know there were some questions further up, so don't worry, I haven't missed them in the chat. I was just doing those more recent ones there because they grabbed my attention. Jason, is Nix and Kix available in the US or any plans to become available over in the States?
Yes. There's a long story there. We actually had a kind of obviously in the US is a huge market. You can't just be like in the US, that would be like crazy. So you need to be need to understand where in the US you want to be. Obviously, New York is the obvious one. Another one is California. But then there are other areas in the US where it also would make sense that are maybe a bit overlooked. So we found a distributor. Obviously, you go through distributors. Well, that is our strategy anyway, to go through distributors when you go into other countries, because you can't be there physically. Either you open your own office and then you have to employ people, and then it gets quite big and costly quite quickly, or you have a distributor that is already in the country, understands their customer base, understands where the product can go, and can do all that kind of selling in and whatever. And so yeah, we found a distributor in the US, which was very much hyped and had investment from Coca-Cola, very amazing, sounded all really good. Yeah, but unfortunately went bankrupt during the process of accepting our product and trying to resell it. So there was a lot of product in a warehouse in New Jersey for a long time. So yes, our product is physically in the US. And we need to figure out now what, there were other distributors that were really interested in helping us over there. So it's basically just a matter of getting that going again.
All right, you heard it here first. If anyone is in the New Jersey area, there's a warehouse full of Nix Kix bottles in there.
Yes, they would have expired by now. So no, no longer interesting for the consumers. But yeah.
Oh, what a shame, what a waste. But lessons learned, lessons learned. But that's really interesting. Jason, thanks for the great question. I'm aware that you're based in California, so watch this space. Hopefully Nix and Kix will be on your shop shelves in your state. And then one more question. We're nearing the end of the time, so let's just squeeze this one in. Please remember, everyone, we've got a thanks, Jason. We've got a quick quiz at the end, so please hang tight. All right, final question from Daniel. I assume that there are quite a few regulations around food and beverages. How did you manage to iterate quickly and still comply with regulations? Amazing question, Daniel. Thank you.
Yes. So yes, there are a lot of regulations, and a lot of kind of regulations in particular around what you can say about your product, what you can't say about your product. You can't obviously a load of claims that maybe have been proven through some certain tests or through your own or maybe some other people still cannot be just put on a packaging. You need to definitely go through a long process there and understand what is kind of doable and what is not. And product itself, I guess that's what you meant more than that is, yeah, you work with someone that knows more about this sort of thing. Obviously, initially we didn't. I only had like the food standards come in and just check that my kitchen was kind of clean. And once they established that, they let me get on with it. Later on, obviously, once you then work with a manufacturer or flavor house, obviously, they understand what the kind of what needs to be done to make sure that the product is good to go and good to be on a shelf. So you work with people that have more knowledge than you do.
I feel like there's a pearl of wisdom in entrepreneurship there, Kerstin, in terms of you as the entrepreneur, you spot the opportunity, find the gap in the market, you've got that firepower to get things off the ground. And then as soon as you get that ball rolling, lean on subject matter experts, as you were just describing there with the whole, regulation piece. All right, Kemi, I beat you to it. The link for the quiz is in the chat. Everyone, please click on that link in the chat or simply scan the QR code that's on screen here. We only have one question to ask you in the quiz. So I'm just going to give everyone a few minutes. Please give us a thumbs up, an emoji reaction to let us know that you've done it before we share the answer, which is actually code for me finding the answer. All right, the question should be, how did Kerstin raise £4 million in funding for her business? Was it option A, bootstrapping, B, from angel investors, or C, from grants? Kerstin, what's the answer?
It's from angel investors. I wish it was grants.
Who got that one right? Yeah, I think most of you got that from angel investors, exactly. Kerstin, thank you so much. I feel like the time has flown. I could have definitely gone on for many more hours, but very grateful for your time and especially being so candid and open, sharing the highs and lows of the business and what you learned along the way. I'm really grateful. I've definitely learned something new here today. I hope the rest of the One Day community have as well. So thank you so much, Kerstin, and thank you to everyone for joining with us this evening.
Thank you as well, Stephanie. And also, I mean, if there's any other question, anything else that anyone would like to ask me, just feel free to message me.